على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. القول مني في جميع الأشياء قول آل محمد فيما أسروا وما أعلنوا وفيما بلغني عنهم وفيما لم يبلغني. أما بعد، فقد قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ضرب الله مثلا للذين آمنوا امرأة فرعون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. In these days, we are commemorating the birth of our dear Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman, but specifically in these 2 days, we are also commemorating the birth of Sayyida Ruqaya, the daughter of Imam al-Hussein, salamullahi alayhi wa salamullahi alayha. This great woman, despite living a very limited amount of years, has left behind a great legacy. A legacy which is remembered for over 1,300 years. A legacy that people honor until today. This great lady, many lessons can be derived from her life. And many things we can learn from, especially her relationship with her father, Al-Imam al-Hussein, salamullahi alayh. As in today, insha'Allah, this lecture, we are going to be only looking at one story of a Sayyida Ruqaya salamullahi alayha with her father, which is the aspect of her preparing the prayer mat for her father, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. This thing which seems so simple, something that people would overlook, there are many lessons in that very simple action that Sayyida Ruqaya salamullahi alayha does for her father, Al-Imam al-Hussein. We'll look at 3 aspects and 3 lessons we can derive today from this great action that Sayyida Ruqaya salamullahi alayha would do for her father, Al-Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. The first aspect and the first lesson that we learn from Sayyida Ruqaya salamullahi alayha is the idea that raising one child requires the collective effort of an entire community. Raising one child requires the collective effort of an entire community. Not just the father and mother. See, Sayyida Ruqaya salamullahi alayha, yes, her father was Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. But she didn't just get her upbringing from her father. She had uncles like Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. She had aunties like Sayyida Zainab and Kulthum. She had older brothers such as Ali al-Akbar and Imam al-Sajjad. She had cousins such as Al-Qasim ibn al-Hasan. This is an entire community, and this community works collectively to raise the individual child. This isn't just the effort of one person or the mother and the father, and this is with every child. Raising a child, especially in this day and age, requires the effort of a community. And the responsibility is also based on the community. We look at a hadith from the Imam alayhi salam. He says, أيما ناشئ نشأ في قوم ثم لم يؤدب على معصية فإن الله عز وجل أول ما يعاقبهم فيه أن ينقص من أرزاقهم. The Imam alayhi salam says, he says, one person being raised in a community, if this one person or this child, when he is raised in this community, is not taught to refrain from ma'siyah, to refrain from sin, as in if this community does not do its job in raising this child, in ordering good and denying evil for this child, then the first thing that Allah does to this entire community is take away or reduce their rizq, their sustenance. Look at the impact. Look at the responsibility that Allah places not just on the mother and father. Yes, the mother and father have the primary responsibility, but it is the community effort that raises the child. Everyone in a community has to do their role when it comes to the future generation. And you can start very simple. You as an individual, are you an uncle, an auntie, an older brother, an older sister, an older cousin, a family friend? Help out. Invite the young members every Sunday, for example, bringing them to the Hussainyat, bringing them to the mosque. Do your part. Give advice where advice is needed, because sometimes the mother and father can't get to the child. So they'll bring in what? An uncle, an auntie, so on and so forth. Do your part. As a community, it is important that we do our part. We look at the verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَيَا قَوْمِ اسْتَغْفِرُوا رَبَّكُمْ ثُمَّ تُوبُوا إِلَيْهِ يُرْسِلُ السَّمَاءَ عَلَيْكُمْ مِدْرَارًا وَيُزِدْكُمْ قُوَّةً إِلَىٰ قُوَّتِكُمْ وَلَا تَتَوَلَّوْا مُجْرِمِينَ. The last part is what I'm trying to focus on. Allah says in this verse from Surah Hud that hold on to istighfar, hold on to the remembrance of Allah, return to Allah collectively, not individually, collectively return to Allah. Allah will give you sustenance, Allah will give you rizq. But then it says, وَلَا تَتَوَلَّوْا مُجْرِمِينَ, and ensure that in this community of yours, you extradite the criminals, those who go against Allah. Make sure that these acts are known that they are unacceptable in this community. Because that's what the child grows up on. If the child grows up in a community that tolerates sin, in a community that accepts sin, this child will grow up with that sin. This child will grow up with that sin. However, if the child grows up in a community that is intolerant of sin, that is intolerant of disrespect, that is intolerant of bad akhlaq, what happens? This child grows up intolerant of bad akhlaq, intolerant of sins. So this child, when he ends up being exposed to the world, he already has immunity from the sin. He already has immunity from the bad akhlaq. Why? Because the community have set the standard. The community have set the standard. The community, when they see a child doing something wrong, they tell him. They'll say, my son, my daughter, what you're doing is wrong. Not forcing them, not being angry at them, no. But with genuine respect and care, they are taught that this community does not allow certain things. And then they build up this immunity. So when they go out to the real world, they have immunity. Or what we call mana'. From any virus that may come and attack them. They have immunity. Because the community worked together. The community came together for this one child. For this one child. There's a beautiful African proverb or a saying that it says, it's beautiful. It says, the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down just to feel its warmth. A child who is not embraced by the village will burn the village down just to feel the warmth. As in, if this community does not work together into embracing this child, taking care of this child, showing that this child is important and this child matters, the child will turn against the community. The child will turn against his own people. The child will turn against his own religion. Why? Because the community did not embrace him with warmth. It's very important. That's why when we say Sayyidah Ruqaya salamullahi alayha, such a great role model, look at the community she was around. How they embrace her. And how everyone does their part. Everyone plays their role into raising that one child. This is a very important lesson that we need to learn from that time, from Sayyidah Ruqaya salamullahi alayha, and from that community. Those great men and women. The second lesson that we can learn is the importance of the early exposure and connection to Allah Azza wa Jal with the child. See, Sayyidah Ruqaya salamullahi alayha had only lived 5 years in this world. And the max of the hadith, what they say, is 7. But what's known amongst everyone is 5. Sayyidah Ruqaya was 5. However, at that young age, look at her love for worship. The fact that whenever the time of salah would come, she was already ready for her father. She would lay the prayer mat. She would prepare everything her father, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, would need for prayer. This isn't forcing someone. This is that person loving the worship of Allah, loving the closeness of Allah Azza wa Jal at the age of 5. See, with us, we introduce religion to our children way too late. They're 5 years old, you want to tell them to read Quran, to start including themselves in salat, to start attending the Hussainyat, the father will say he's too young, he doesn't know anything, but they don't know how important that is. Because the children, they carry what they learn at a young age. And this is what science has proven, that from a very young age, imagine that the child starts listening to language when he or she is in their mother's wombs. This is what recently was discovered. The child can listen to anyone who is speaking when he or she is in the mother's womb, and can discern between the language of the mother and the language of someone else. So if the mother speaks English, he knows English in the mother's womb, and he detects that. But when someone else was to speak another language, he would notice. And he's in his mother's womb as early as 6 to 8 weeks old. The child begins absorbing, begins understanding. So it is very important at that young age for us to what? Create that connection between the child and between Allah Azza wa Jal. And everything has an impact. Don't think that you bringing your children or us bringing our children to these Hussainyat or to these types of programs doesn't have an impact, even if they don't listen. Even if they're sitting and they're playing, it's fine. These all have impacts. These all have an effect on the child when they grow up. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, he says, إِذَا بَلَغَ الْغُلَامِ 3 سِنِينَ فَقُلْ لَهُ 7 مرات قُلْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ ثُمَّ يُتْرَكْ. The Imam says, when a child reaches 3 years old, teach the child to say La ilaha illallah 7 times, and then leave the child. Leave him. But make sure he says La ilaha illallah 7 times. What does that mean? The repetition of La ilaha illallah. What's La ilaha illallah? It's the foundation of this religion. The foundation of Tawheed. So when you make sure that the child repeats the phrase, there is no God but Allah, what happens? This becomes part of the child. This becomes part of the child's identity. Tawheed becomes part of the child's idea. And that impacts them when they grow up. That's why the Imams order us to do this. This is why dhikr is so important. Because the repetition of this phrase implants it into the consciousness of the child. These things all impact the child. You want to tell me that my child is too young, leave him, let him play, let him go on his iPad, let him listen to God wherever he listens to, let him listen to TikTok, let him go on Instagram, let him. And then all of a sudden your son is 5 years old and he's doing all these stupid trends and saying all these inappropriate things because you left him. It's your fault. It's no one else's fault. You could have been teaching him dhikr. You could have been teaching him dua. I'm not saying to do that 24/7 and to make him a monk. I'm saying even little things, half an hour a day, an hour a week, that impacts the child. But us, we pretend like, oh, we want the child to have freedom, it's too young, we don't want to ruin the child. What's so ruining about the child by introducing Islam to him? I don't understand this. When they keep on saying, oh, leave the child's innocence, are we making him a criminal by introducing him to Allah? Are we making him a criminal by teaching him Quran? By teaching him the words of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad? It is very surprising when I see some people, they say this. My child's too young, do not try to ruin him, 1, 2 and 3. And then his child, his son or his daughter, when they reach 15 years old, what do? They come back to the Hussainyat. They blame the sheikh. They come back to the Hussainyat. They blame the lecturer. They blame the religion. They blame the mosque. They blame everyone but themselves. What happened? My child left the path. طلع من الطريق. My daughter no longer wears the hijab. My son doesn't want to pray. Where were you? Where were you? You waited until they were 15 years old. And just because you want to get rid of them, you're tired from work, you give them the iPad. Hak baba. Ruh. And then God knows what they watch. And God knows what they're exposed to. It's important. We have to understand. We have to be aware of what we are exposing our children to. Because there are some people who work towards destroying your child. There are certain entities, ideologies that are working very hard to steer your child off of Islam. You have to work just as hard to make sure that your child stays on Islam. It is not an exaggeration where the Imam says that at the end of times holding on to religion will be harder to hold on to a piece of coal. It is not an exaggeration because it is true. Look at us today. Look how difficult it is for our children, our youth to hold on to their religion with everything around them. So we have to give them the proper support when it comes to this. So when you teach them to get closer to Allah, when you begin teaching them salah, when you begin teaching them all of these things, make sure it is enjoyable for them. Make sure it is pleasurable for them. Do not force it upon them. Do not sit there and you angrily screaming at them and you tell them you have to do this, otherwise Jahannam, otherwise you go to Jahannam, otherwise Allah hangs you Jahannam, puts you Jahannam, left Jahannam, right Jahannam. They weren't like that. And as soon as they grow up, they'll leave anything related to Islam. The Imam alayhi salam, he says, La adab ma'a ghadab. There is no teaching when you're angry. You're angry and you're trying to teach your son akhlaq. Yalla. You're angry, you're screaming, you're swearing, and you're trying to teach your son akhlaq. Or then you get more furious and you want to try to hit your son. You think that son's going to love Islam after that? You think your son's ever going to think about Islam after you hit him or her? The Imam alayhi salam, he says, one of the companions comes to the Imam. شكوت إلى أبي الحسن موسى عليه السلام ابنا لي فقال لي لا تضرب واهجره ولا تطل. He says, I went to the Imam because my son doesn't listen to me 1, 2 and 3. The Imam told me, do not hit him. Ihjur, yes. Do not talk to him, but for a short period of time. ولا تطل. Do not extend the period by which you do not speak to your son. No. Keep it brief. Nothing more than 3 days. Keep it very brief. But just to teach him a lesson that what you done was unacceptable. But do not think you hear أحسنتم صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Do not think that hitting your son or your daughter is going to get them closer to Allah. Do not think getting angry at them and screaming at your son and daughter is going to get them closer to Allah Azza wa Jal. That doesn't work. That only gets them further away from Islam. That only gets them further away from religion. Because punishment, as we know it, does not work. It does not work. And they've studied this. They've seen is punishment effective? Because people would say, the elders, who were used to being raised by getting hit by their parents, they were like, it works. But well and truly, it doesn't work. Punishment doesn't work. It's ineffective. It's not about emotions or anything right now. We're talking about how effective it is. Does it actually work? Does it actually keep the child from staying away from whatever you beat them to stay away from? It doesn't work. It's ineffective. Look at all the studies related to punishment and the types of punishment, and if it even works. It doesn't work. And especially the type of punishments that we have. The delayed punishment, that your child does something bad in public, you wait until they come back, you beat them, he doesn't know what happened. Why am I getting beat? I don't know. These things don't work. Punishment is ineffective. So it is important that we make worship enjoyable for our child. You think Sayyidah Ruqaya salamullahi alayha, by every single prayer time would prepare the prayer mat for her father, Imam al-Hussein, because Imam al-Hussein beat her until she done that? Or he screamed at her until she done that? Or he got angry at her until she done that? No. And we all know the akhlaq of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. The same akhlaq of the greatest of Allah's creation, Rasulullah Muhammad. That ادعو إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة. That call to the worship of Allah with wisdom, with love, with sincerity. And your first course of action to get your child to get closer to Allah, to get your child to love worship, to get your child to have a connection with Allah, is for you to have a connection with Allah. Is for you to love the worship of Allah. Because what does the child go off of? Action, not words. You're there, you're angry, you're yelling at your child, why don't you pray on time? Why don't you do this? And you pray 5 minutes before Adhan al-Maghrib, you pray Dhuhr and Asr, so that you can combine the 4 prayers together, mashallah. 1 turbo. combined all 4 prayers. And then you want your son or daughter to pray on time. You tell your son and daughter, do not lie. But then when someone knocks on the door, you'll tell your wife, go tell them I'm not home. Mu bil bayt. And then your child looks at you and then he says, mashallah, do not lie. The actions are what are important in raising the children. What you do is what the child will do, not what you say. You can say something. It's all good and well. But if you do not do it yourself, it goes in one ear, goes out the other ear. You think Sayyidah Ruqaya would wake up every time for salah if her father doesn't get up for salah every time? It's in the actions. It's not in the words. It's in what you do. So, making sure that your child loves the worship of Allah is very important. And it leaves a lasting effect. There is a story of a man who met another man during travels. They traveled for a long time. In their travels, one of the men who was traveling, he noticed this guy that he was with, his companion, he never misses Salat al-Layl. Never misses. They had a long trip together, a very long one. And in that trip, his friend never missed Salat al-Layl. Without a shadow of a doubt, even if they had slept for half an hour before that or an hour before that, this man would wake up without an alarm, without anything, and he would get up for Salat al-Layl. So after a long period of time, the man asked him, he said, what's your secret? How is it that every day, without excuse, despite the circumstance, you wake up for Salat al-Layl? Without any exception. He said, I'll tell you why, and it's very simple. He said, when I was a young boy, around 5 years old, 6 years old, my mother used to wake up for Salat al-Layl. But what would happen is my mother would wake me up with her. I would get frustrated, I would start crying, whatever. But to make sure that I enjoyed waking up for Salat al-Layl, my mum would give me candy, halawa. She would give me candy every time I woke up for Salat al-Layl with her. And this was ever since I was 5 years old. He says she done that with me for a couple of years, 2 years, 3 years, no longer than that. And then she passed away. But ever since that time, I feel like it's been engraved on me and I cannot ignore it. Even if I want to sleep through it, I'll wake up. Look at when you have a mother who cares about her child. How this man grew up to never leave Salatul Layl. And that requires luck. That requires tawfiq. That requires aid from Allah Azza wa Jal for someone to be able to wake up and pray Salatul Layl, the night prayers before Fajr, every single day unequivocally. But look how important it is if you introduce it at a young age. That child will never want to leave worship of Allah. If you introduce it in the right way, not with anger, not with forcing them, but in the right way, they will never leave the worship of Allah. They will enjoy the worship of Allah. The worship of Allah will be a source of solace, will be a source of comfort for that child. Instead of being the source of comfort doom scrolling, or the source of comfort being God knows whatever else. Having the worship of Allah as the source of comfort. Now, we go over to the third and final point after a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And that lesson that we can learn from Sayyidah Ruqaya salamullahi alayha is to make spirituality and the closeness of Allah the core aspect of the family. See, a lot of people, they misconstrue the identity. So when you ask them, what are you? They will give you 17 different titles before they tell you about their religion. What are you? I'm from such and such nation. What are you? I'm a student. What are you? I work in this. What are you? I own a business. What are you? I'm an Australian citizen. What are you? What are you? The last thing they would want to tell you is, I'm Shia Muslim. And the funniest one until now today is when you ask them, are you Shia or Sunni? They'll tell you, I'm Muslim. I didn't ask that. You see these people? Why are you so embarrassed of your faith? Why are you so embarrassed of your faith? Why are you so unwilling to accept who you are? His name's Ali or Ja'far or Mustafa. He grows up a little bit, he changes it. calls himself Donald or Jeffrey or Sam. What's wrong with your name? No, Allah, I can't get work with my name. When I apply for work, no one accepts my name. Yeah? So is that what you're willing to do for money? Let go of your identity? Is it really that tough that you have to change your name for some work? See, this, one of the reasons why this happens stems from an upbringing that didn't have Islam or Allah as its core. From an upbringing that religion was something secondary, was something like culture. So when you ask them, what culture are you? They'll tell you, well, I'm Muslim. And then they ask them what culture. It comes from an upbringing where Allah is not the center of the family. See, when you live in a household like Sayyidah Ruqaya, where the center is Allah, the center is the Quran, the center is gaining closeness to Allah Azza wa Jal, it becomes your identity, whether they like it or not. I am who I am. I am who I am. When you live in that environment, where you are unapologetic about who you are, and you are proud about who you are, you do not hide from it. You do not cower behind something else. I am who I am. I'm proud to be it. I'm proud to be it. Why? Because you grew up in a family where Islam was the center. And gaining closeness to Allah is what created the bonds. See, nowadays, families, they bond by any other means other than gaining closeness to Allah. They will bond over going to the cinemas. They will bond over going out on a family. And there's nothing wrong with that. Don't take the wrong idea that I'm saying, no, it's haram to go cinemas or it's haram to go on picnics. No, that's something beautiful. But never in any of these bonding experiences is Allah mentioned one time. Is Allah mentioned a single time? Never. Whereas if you have these beautiful experiences such as picnics, such as going out with the family, and you have Allah in the middle of it. You sit down, you tell your son, read some Quran. Or you tell your other son, read some dhikr. Or when the time of prayer comes, you start praying. This ensures that your family grows up in an environment where Allah is the center of it. And when they grow up, they will never leave this identity. They will be proud of that identity. So ensure, and especially with the month of Ramadan coming, this is a beautiful and perfect opportunity to make Islam the epicenter. The bonding experiences will be around Shahr Ramadan, around Iftar, around Dua al-Iftitah, around Layali al-Qadr. This all forms the identity of the child. And we learn from Sayyidah Ruqaya Salamullahi alayha these very few lessons that I've mentioned, whereas there's so much more to this great lady despite her young years that she lived. اللهم عجل وليك الفرج والعافية والنصر واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه ومن شيعته ومحبيه وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.